It's wonderful to have you here. Something happened today that stayed with you longer than it should have, and your brain has already begun deciding what to do about it. How does your sleeping brain silently process the day's stress without you doing anything at all? Welcome to Sleepy Science. That feeling of carrying something home from the day, turning it over, replaying it, is exactly where tonight's science begins. The brain's overnight repair system has been rewriting what we thought recovery required, toward why trying harder to recover is the one thing that slows it down. Close your eyes and breathe deeply. You're already inside the repair. Let your mind soften with the night's quiet work. And now we begin. Every night, without any instruction from you, your brain begins a process that neuroscientists now describe as one of the most sophisticated emotional maintenance systems ever studied in biology. During sleep, certain neural circuits that were activated by stressful experiences during the day are quietly revisited, not to replay them, but to strip away the emotional charge attached to them. You keep the memory. You lose the sting. This is the central question tonight. How does your sleeping brain silently process the day's stress without you doing anything at all? The answer involves specific brain regions, precise chemical conditions, and stages of sleep that each perform a different part of this nightly repair. It begins the moment your eyes close. The brain structure most responsible for detecting threat and emotional intensity is the amygdala, a small, almond-shaped cluster of neurons located deep in the temporal lobe. During stressful waking experiences, the amygdala fires strongly, tagging memories with urgency and fear. But during REM sleep, researchers at the University of California, Berkeley, discovered something striking. Activity in the amygdala drops significantly, even as the brain continues processing emotional memories from the day. Norepinephrine, the neurochemical most associated with stress arousal, falls to its lowest levels of the entire day during REM sleep. This chemical quiet creates a window, a kind of protected space, in which the brain can examine emotionally charged memories without triggering the alarm response all over again. The prefrontal cortex, the region of the brain responsible for rational thought, perspective, and emotional regulation, remains surprisingly active during REM sleep. While you dream, it continues to work, applying context and meaning to memories stored earlier in the day. Researchers describe this as a recalibration. The prefrontal cortex essentially reviews the amygdala's emotional tags and asks whether they still belong. If a stressful event from yesterday is no longer an active threat, the brain begins to quietly reduce the intensity of that tag. This is not forgetting. The factual record of what happened stays intact. What diminishes is the raw emotional weight, the spike of anxiety, the tightening in the chest that came with it when it first happened. Matthew Walker, a sleep scientist at the University of California, Berkeley, proposed what he called the sleep to forget, sleep to remember hypothesis. The idea is that REM sleep serves a dual function. It consolidates the informational content of an experience while simultaneously weakening the emotional tone attached to it. This allows the brain to learn from stressful events without being permanently destabilized by them. Think of it this way. A memory of a difficult meeting stays accessible, but the physical sensation of panic that accompanied it is gradually softened over successive nights of sleep. Walker's research, and the work of dozens of subsequent studies, has repeatedly shown that people who sleep well after stressful events report significantly lower emotional reactivity to those events the following day. REM sleep is not evenly distributed across the night. The first sleep cycle, roughly 90 minutes long, contains relatively little REM. As the night progresses, each cycle contains more and more. This means that most of the brain's emotional processing happens in the second half of the night, between about 4 and 8 hours after you fall asleep. If you cut sleep short by even an hour or two in the morning, the hours most people sacrifice most easily, you disproportionately cut into REM. A person who sleeps 6 hours instead of 8 loses far more than a quarter of their REM. They lose closer to half. The emotional cost of that missing time shows up the following day as heightened reactivity and a lower stress threshold. The glymphatic system is a network of channels that runs alongside the brain's blood vessels, clearing metabolic waste that accumulates during waking hours. During sleep, especially deep, slow-wave sleep, the brain's cells shrink slightly, expanding these channels by what animal studies estimate to be up to 60%, with evidence in humans continuing to grow. Cerebrospinal fluid rushes through at a higher rate, flushing out waste products, including beta-amyloid and tau proteins. Among the byproducts cleared during this process is excess cortisol, the primary stress hormone that has accumulated through the day. Sleep is therefore not only an emotional repair system but a literal chemical detoxification process, removing the physical residue of daily stress from the brain's tissue while you rest. Cortisol follows a predictable rhythm across the day. It peaks in the morning, providing alertness and motivation, and gradually declines through the afternoon and evening. Stressful events, however, spike cortisol outside this normal rhythm, flooding the brain and body with arousal signals. Chronically elevated cortisol, the kind that comes from sustained stress, interferes directly with hippocampal function. The hippocampus, the brain's primary memory consolidation center, is unusually sensitive to cortisol. When cortisol stays elevated into the night, it disrupts the memory consolidation process that normally occurs during sleep, preventing the brain from properly filing the day's experiences. Sleep, by allowing cortisol to fall to its natural overnight low, restores the conditions the hippocampus needs to do its work. During NREM sleep, specifically the deep, slow-wave stages, the brain generates large, synchronized electrical waves called delta waves, oscillating at less than 4 cycles per second. These slow oscillations coordinate a conversation between the hippocampus, which holds new short-term memories, and the neocortex, responsible for long-term storage. With each slow wave, packets of memory are transferred and integrated. Stress-related memories are included in this transfer, but the process of integration gradually strips them of their raw urgency. By the time a memory is consolidated into the neocortex, it has been contextually embedded, linked to other experiences, given perspective, rather than sitting in isolation as a raw, unprocessed event. The brain is not just storing, it is organizing. Sleep spindles are brief bursts of coordinated neural activity during NREM sleep, lasting only half a second to 2 seconds, occurring hundreds of times each night. Research published in the journal Sleep has linked spindle density, how frequently they occur, to emotional resilience. People who generate more sleep spindles after stressful experiences report lower anxiety and fewer intrusive thoughts the following day. Sleep spindles appear to act as a gate, actively suppressing external noise and internal emotional signals during memory consolidation, protecting the process from disruption. They are a quiet, invisible feature of sleep that most people never think about, yet they play a measurable role in how well the brain neutralizes stress while you rest. The hippocampus holds newly encoded memories in a fragile, temporary state immediately after they are formed. During this consolidation window, which extends through the first night of sleep after an experience, those memories are particularly vulnerable to modification. Stress hormones present during waking hours can make memories emotionally stickier, encoding them with higher intensity than neutral events. But sleep provides the counterbalance. During slow-wave sleep, the hippocampus replays the day's memories in compressed form. Sequences of neural activity that echo the original experience, but at much faster speed, allowing the neocortex to absorb them without the full emotional weight of the original event. This replay is not a re-experiencing of stress. It is a quiet transcription, stripping content from charge. In a study from the University of Massachusetts, participants were shown emotionally disturbing images and then either slept for 90 minutes or remained awake for the same period. Those who slept showed significantly reduced emotional reactivity when shown the same images again afterward. Activity in the amygdala was measurably lower in the sleep group. Brain scans also showed stronger connectivity between the prefrontal cortex and the amygdala in those who had slept, suggesting that sleep not only quiets the alarm system, but actively strengthens the regulatory connection between the emotional brain and the reasoning brain. This prefrontal amygdala connectivity is precisely what breaks down under chronic stress and sleep deprivation, making people feel overwhelmed by emotions they would normally manage with ease. Dreaming appears to serve a specific function in emotional memory processing. During REM sleep, the brain preferentially reactivates memories that carry emotional significance, particularly those tagged with fear, anxiety, or unresolved tension. But crucially, it does so in an environment of suppressed norepinephrine. Norepinephrine is the neurochemical that creates the sense of alarm and urgency when a threatening event is first experienced. Without it, during REM, the brain can replay the emotional memory without the physiological fight or flight response firing alongside it. Over multiple nights, the memory's association with that alarm state is gradually weakened. This is why a nightmare can feel terrifying in the moment but lose its grip when recalled weeks later. The process is working, quietly, every night. Post-traumatic stress disorder offers a striking window into what happens when this overnight repair system fails. In PTSD, norepinephrine levels during REM sleep remain abnormally elevated, preventing the normal chemical suppression that allows emotional detoxification to occur. The result is that traumatic memories are replayed during dreams without being processed, returned to consciousness the next morning with their full emotional charge intact, or even amplified. This is why people with PTSD experience intrusive flashbacks rather than fading memories. The brain is attempting the repair protocol, but cannot complete it. Understanding this failure mechanism has led researchers to explore medications that reduce norepinephrine activity during sleep, with early clinical results showing measurable reductions in nightmare frequency and distress. The locus coeruleus is a small nucleus in the brainstem that serves as the brain's primary source of norepinephrine. During waking hours, it fires constantly, tuning arousal, focus, and alertness. During REM sleep, it falls almost completely silent, a state that appears to be essential for healthy emotional processing. Damage to the locus coeruleus, or disruption of its normal REM phase silencing, is associated with impaired emotional regulation and increased vulnerability to anxiety disorders. The brain's ability to quiet this structure during sleep is not incidental. It appears to be one of the core mechanisms by which REM performs its overnight repair. Without that window of neurochemical quiet, the emotional brain cannot safely revisit the day's more difficult experiences and begin to release them. Sleep quality and emotional resilience form a bidirectional relationship. Each influences the other in a self-reinforcing loop. Poor sleep increases emotional reactivity and stress sensitivity, which in turn makes it harder to fall and stay asleep, which further degrades emotional regulation. This cycle is measurable in brain imaging studies. People with chronic sleep difficulties show hyperactivity in the amygdala and reduced prefrontal regulatory function even during waking hours, not just in response to specific stressors. Breaking this cycle at either point helps the other. Improving sleep hygiene reduces emotional reactivity. Reducing daytime stress load improves sleep depth and continuity. The brain does not separate these two systems. They are different expressions of the same underlying architecture, and both respond to being given consistent, adequate rest. Slow wave sleep, the deepest stage of NREM, is when the body's stress hormone production reaches its lowest point of the entire day. Growth hormone, by contrast, peaks during this same stage. Growth hormone plays a role not just in physical repair but in neural plasticity, the brain's ability to form new connections and reorganize existing ones. This means that deep sleep is simultaneously clearing cortisol and providing the neurochemical conditions for the brain to restructure how it represents stressful experiences. The result is a gradual shift in how those experiences are encoded, moving them from raw, isolated events toward integrated, contextualized memories that fit within the broader pattern of a life. to what we experience as emotional recovery over time. The theta rhythm, a brainwave oscillating between 4 and 8 cycles per second, is strongly associated with REM sleep and plays a key role in emotional memory processing. Theta activity in the prefrontal cortex and hippocampus during REM correlates with the strength of emotional learning and the degree to which emotional charge is reduced the following day. Researchers propose, based largely on animal models, that theta band activity in a region called the infralimbic cortex actively suppresses fear responses during REM sleep by weakening the connections between memory traces and the alarm signals they originally triggered. This appears to be the same mechanism involved in extinction learning, the process by which fears naturally fade when a threat no longer materializes. The hippocampus and the amygdala are physically adjacent structures in the medial temporal lobe, and they communicate constantly. During waking stress, the amygdala essentially hijacks hippocampal encoding, ensuring that emotionally intense events are stored with high fidelity and strong retrieval cues. This is useful for survival. You want to remember what frightened you. But during REM sleep, this dynamic reverses. The hippocampus gains relative dominance, and the prefrontal cortex exerts stronger regulatory control over the amygdala. This shift in the balance of power allows the hippocampus to process emotional memories without the amygdala amplifying their urgency. Sleep, in this sense, is the only natural state in which the emotional brain voluntarily loosens its grip long enough for healing to occur. Research examining how sleep affects responses to social stressors, specifically the experience of rejection, has found consistent patterns across multiple studies. Participants who slept normally after a social stressor showed a gradual reduction in cortisol reactivity when reminded of the experience 24 hours later. Participants who were sleep-deprived showed no such reduction. Their cortisol response remained as elevated as it had been immediately after the event. The conclusion across this body of work is that sleep is not merely passive recovery from stress. It is an active process that changes the neurobiological encoding of the stressful experience, making it literally less activating to the system when encountered again. Without sleep, the reset does not happen. The body carries the full chemical signature forward. BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor, is a protein that supports the growth and maintenance of neurons and plays a critical role in synaptic plasticity, the ability of neural connections to strengthen or weaken based on experience. Chronic stress suppresses BDNF production, particularly in the hippocampus, contributing to the cognitive fog and memory difficulties that accompany prolonged periods of high stress. Sleep, and particularly slow-wave sleep, reliably increases BDNF levels. This rise supports not only memory consolidation, but neural repair, the rebuilding of connections weakened by stress. Think of it as the brain's maintenance crew, arriving each night to patch the damage accumulated during the day, working quietly while you rest, leaving the structure more resilient than it was when you lay down. The vagus nerve, the longest cranial nerve in the body, running from the brainstem through the heart, lungs, and digestive system, plays a central role in switching the body between stress and recovery modes. During sleep, parasympathetic nervous system activity increases, gaining stronger influence over heart rate, breathing, and visceral function. This shift is not a passive consequence of sleep. It is an active biological mechanism that counteracts the sympathetic arousal, the fight or flight activation, accumulated during the day. As parasympathetic tone rises through the night, heart rate variability increases, breathing slows and deepens, and the body's inflammatory markers gradually decline. By morning, a well-slept person has a measurably different physiological baseline than they had at midnight. The body has been unwinding, hour by hour. Interleukin-6 and tumor necrosis factor, two inflammatory cytokines that increase during periods of psychological stress, both decline during adequate sleep. Chronic psychological stress creates a state of low-grade systemic inflammation that over time is associated with increased risk of cardiovascular disease, metabolic disorders, and mood disturbances. Sleep interrupts this inflammatory cascade. During slow-wave sleep specifically, the immune system performs a recalibration, not suppression, but recalibration, resetting the inflammatory response toward its baseline. This is one reason that people who consistently sleep well show lower long-term inflammatory markers, even when they experience equivalent levels of daily stress compared to poor sleepers. The body uses the quiet hours to undo the chemical footprint that stress leaves behind. The amygdala does not process positive and negative emotional memories identically. Negative, threat-related memories are given priority encoding during waking hours, a feature of the stress response that evolved for survival. During sleep, however, positive and neutral memories receive relatively more processing attention, since the threat detection system is no longer dominating the encoding hierarchy. Over multiple nights, this gradual rebalancing shifts the ratio of accessible memory slightly, making neutral and positive experiences more retrievable, while stress-related memories lose some of their retrieval priority. This is part of why time and sleep together tend to soften the emotional impact of difficult experiences. It is not passive fading. It is active reweighting, performed nightly, while you are entirely unaware. Sleep architecture, the sequence and proportion of sleep stages across a full night, is itself sensitive to stress. High stress in the hours before sleep tends to delay sleep onset, reduce slow-wave sleep in the early cycles, and increase the fragmentation of REM later in the night. This means that on the nights you most need your brain to perform emotional processing, chronic stress is precisely what degrades the architecture that allows that processing to occur. This is why high-stress periods often feel self-perpetuating. Poor sleep impairs emotional regulation, which increases stress reactivity the next day, which disrupts sleep again the following night. The brain has a correction mechanism, but chronic stress is exactly the kind of input that prevents it from running. Targeted memory reactivation is a research technique that offers a window into how the brain processes emotional memories during sleep. In these studies, a sound or scent is paired with a stressful memory during waking hours. When that same cue is played softly during REM sleep, the associated memory is reactivated, and the emotional charge attached to it is measurably reduced by morning. Recent work has extended this finding, showing that targeted reactivation during REM reduced both subjective arousal and physiological stress markers when participants were later exposed to the original stressor. The brain can be gently guided during sleep to process specific unresolved emotional material, and it responds. This is the central question made visible. The brain is already trying for you. It asks nothing in return. You've been with us for a while now, and your breathing has likely softened without you noticing. A soft subscribe helps another sleepless mind find this sanctuary too. Now, let's pause together, one sleepy soul at a time. Let's pause here and notice your body. As you breathe out slowly, appreciate each tiny cell inside. Trillions of organisms working in silence. Heart beating, lungs breathing, brain thinking. All without your command. Notice the gentle sensations on your skin, in your muscles, along your spine. You are a complete ecosystem, diverse, self-balancing. Now we continue. The default mode network, a set of brain regions active when the mind is at rest, plays a role in emotional memory integration during sleep. During REM sleep, it shows patterns of activation similar to those seen during wakeful self-reflection and autobiographical memory processing. This suggests the brain uses REM sleep partly as a period of deep self-referential processing, an internal review in which the day's experiences are examined through the lens of personal narrative and meaning. Stressful events are quietly woven into the broader story of a person's life, reducing their novelty and urgency by placing them in context. The sleeping brain is, in this sense, actively building perspective. Adenosine is a chemical byproduct of neural activity that accumulates in the brain throughout the day, creating the sensation of tiredness. Sleep clears adenosine, resetting the brain's readiness for the next cycle of waking activity. But adenosine also plays a role in stress modulation. High levels of adenosine in certain brain circuits have been shown to reduce amygdala excitability, essentially acting as a natural calming agent. As adenosine builds through the day, it gradually begins to dampen the stress response system, creating a physiological nudge toward rest. Allowing adenosine to accumulate naturally, rather than continually clearing it with caffeine, supports better sleep quality and, consequently, more effective overnight emotional processing. The body's drive to sleep is repair. The insular cortex, buried within the lateral sulcus of the brain, processes interoceptive signals, the felt sense of what is happening inside the body. During stressful experiences, it integrates bodily alarm signals, racing heart, shallow breath, muscle tension, with the emotional interpretation of events, amplifying the sense of threat. During REM sleep, insular activity shifts toward a more neutral register, contributing to the gradual dissociation of physical stress responses from the memories that triggered them. By morning, the memory of a stressful event may remain, but the visceral bodily sensation it once carried, the tightness, the breathlessness, is often substantially reduced. Sleep works on the body's memory of stress, not just the mind's. Emotional memories are not stored as single, isolated files in the brain. They are distributed patterns of neural activity, networks of connected associations linking the factual content of an experience to its emotional context, the physical sensations it produced, and the thoughts that accompanied it. During sleep, particularly during alternating cycles of NREM and REM, these distributed networks are repeatedly reactivated and restructured. With each reactivation, the network changes slightly. Some connections strengthen, others weaken. Over multiple nights, emotional context associations tend to weaken relative to factual ones. The memory becomes less emotionally hot and more cognitively integrated. This is the architecture of overnight emotional repair operating at the level of individual synaptic connections. The phenomenon researchers call emotional memory consolidation. Selectivity describes the brain's tendency to prioritize certain types of emotional memories over others during sleep. Memories tagged with high arousal, whether positive or negative, receive stronger consolidation than low arousal neutral memories. This means that both the best and worst experiences of a day are given preferential processing during overnight rest. For stressful events, this means sleep does not erase them. It deeply consolidates them, but in a transformed state, stripped of their most acute physiological urgency. The goal is not to forget that something difficult happened. The goal is to know it happened without the body continuing to treat it as an ongoing emergency. Sleep performs that transformation, slowly, across many nights. Napping, even briefly, extends some of the emotional processing benefits of sleep into the daytime hours. A 90-minute nap that includes REM produces measurable reductions in emotional reactivity to negative stimuli encountered before the nap. Slow-wave sleep during naps appears particularly useful for processing neutral declarative memories, while REM handles emotional content more effectively. Research has shown that participants who napped after acute stress exposure demonstrated lower cortisol reactivity and improved working memory performance compared to those who remained awake. The brain does not require nighttime to initiate its repair protocols. Any sustained sleep period that includes appropriate architecture, particularly REM, provides access to the same mechanisms that the full night delivers. Melatonin, the hormone that signals the onset of darkness and promotes sleep, also has direct anti-inflammatory and neuroprotective properties. In addition to promoting sleep onset, melatonin reduces oxidative stress in brain tissue, cellular damage caused by free radicals that accumulate during metabolic activity and psychological stress. Through the night, melatonin levels remain elevated for several hours, providing a sustained antioxidant effect throughout the brain. Stress increases oxidative load in neural tissue, contributing to the cognitive symptoms of burnout, difficulty concentrating, impaired memory, reduced mental flexibility. Melatonin acts as a nightly countermeasure, systematically reducing this oxidative burden while sleep simultaneously performs its structural repair work. The night, chemically speaking, is when the brain heals its own damage. The circadian rhythm, the body's internal 24-hour clock, regulated by the suprachiasmatic nucleus of the hypothalamus, governs not just when we sleep, but when each type of sleep occurs. When hormone levels peak and fall, and when the body's repair systems are most active. Chronic stress disrupts circadian timing, shifting cortisol rhythms and melatonin onset, which in turn alters sleep architecture and reduces the effectiveness of overnight emotional processing. Restoring circadian regularity, consistent sleep and wake times, morning light exposure, reduced evening light, is therefore not merely a sleep hygiene habit. It is a biological recalibration of the entire stress recovery system. The brain's repair protocol depends on the clock running on time. Sleep deprivation and acute stress activate overlapping neural circuits. Both increase amygdala reactivity, reduce prefrontal regulatory control, elevate cortisol and norepinephrine, and impair hippocampal function. This overlap reflects the fact that the brain treats sleep loss as a form of physiological stress. Studies using functional MRI have shown that the amygdala of a sleep-deprived person responds to mildly negative images with the same intensity that a well-slept person's amygdala reserves for genuinely threatening ones. The stress threshold drops. Everything feels more urgent, more personal, more difficult to manage. This is why recovery from stressful periods requires not just removing the stressor, but restoring adequate sleep. They are not separate problems. They share the same underlying repair system. The hippocampus has a feature neuroscientists call pattern separation, the ability to distinguish between similar but distinct experiences rather than merging them into a single generalized memory. This matters for emotional memory. It allows the brain to remember that one difficult conversation was different from another, rather than collapsing all stressful interactions into an undifferentiated sense of threat. Chronic sleep deprivation impairs pattern separation, making the stressed, sleep-deprived brain more prone to overgeneralization, treating new situations as more threatening because they superficially resemble old, stressful ones. Adequate sleep preserves this capacity, keeping emotional memories accurately distinct and preventing the spillover that makes prolonged stress feel all-encompassing, rather than bounded and specific. The brain regions involved in social cognition, the ability to read others' emotions, perspective take, and regulate responses in social situations, are all sensitive to sleep quality. Adequate sleep supports activity in the medial prefrontal cortex and temporoparietal junction, both essential for social understanding. Sleep deprivation degrades these circuits, making people more likely to interpret neutral or ambiguous social signals as hostile. Since a significant portion of human stress is social in origin, this degradation of social cognition creates a compounding effect. Poor sleep makes social situations more stressful, which increases arousal before bed, which further disrupts sleep. Overnight emotional processing therefore serves not just individual recovery, but the quality of every interaction that follows. Sleep spindles. those brief bursts of neural oscillation during NREM sleep, are generated primarily by the thalamus, the brain's central relay station for sensory and motor signals. During sleep, the thalamus uses spindles to actively dampen incoming sensory information, protecting the sleeping brain from disruption. This gating function is linked to emotional processing. Research has shown that spindle activity is particularly dense during the consolidation of emotionally arousing memories, and that individuals who generate more spindles per night show better emotional regulation the following day. Spindle density is partly heritable, but also responds to sleep quality. Consistent, uninterrupted sleep tends to produce more spindles and more effective overnight emotional repair. The anterior cingulate cortex, a region at the interface of the emotional and cognitive brain systems, monitors conflicts between what the brain expects and what it actually encounters. During sleep, it participates in the reprocessing of conflict-related memories, situations where outcomes did not match expectations, where plans failed, where social interactions went wrong. These are often the experiences that feel most unresolvable during the day, replaying in the mind as the person lies awake. Sleep gives the anterior cingulate a protected space to process these memories at a lower arousal level, gradually reducing their sense of urgency. A well-rested brain finds fewer things genuinely unfinished. Sleep creates the resolution that waking thought often cannot. Physical exercise reliably improves sleep quality, and one of the key mechanisms is its effect on slow-wave sleep. Moderate aerobic exercise increases the proportion of slow-wave sleep in the following night, deepening the stage at which lymphatic clearing and cortisol reduction are most effective. This creates a compounding benefit. Exercise reduces physiological stress load during the day, and the deeper slow-wave sleep that follows performs more efficient overnight chemical detoxification. The relationship works in the other direction too. Better sleep improves exercise performance and recovery. For people experiencing high stress, moderate daily movement combined with consistent sleep timing offers one of the most well-supported biological interventions for stress resilience, available without medication. Temperature is a powerful regulator of sleep quality and, by extension, overnight emotional processing. The body's core temperature drops by approximately 1 to 2 degrees Fahrenheit during sleep, a drop that signals the circadian system to promote deeper sleep stages. When the bedroom is too warm, this temperature drop is incomplete, reducing slow-wave sleep. Stress itself raises body temperature through sympathetic nervous system activation, creating a cycle. High stress at bedtime elevates temperature, which impairs slow-wave sleep, which reduces overnight cortisol clearance, which elevates stress sensitivity the following day. A cool sleeping environment, around 65 to 68 degrees Fahrenheit, removes one barrier to the temperature drop the sleeping brain requires to do its deepest repair work. You've been listening for a while now. Thoughts still flickering like candlelight. Just notice. Don't judge. Just notice where your mind is. We're exploring the very system that is repairing you right now, quietly, without effort, without your permission. Strange, beautiful, and perfectly calm. Let's drift onward together. Sleep-dependent emotional memory consolidation operates on a prioritization schedule. The brain processes the most intensely charged experiences first, returning to less intense ones in subsequent sleep cycles and across subsequent nights. This is why a single night of good sleep after a major stressor does not fully resolve the emotional charge, but consistent sleep over the following week progressively reduces it. The brain treats emotional recovery as a multi-session process, each night completing another round of the same careful work. Recovery is not about feeling better immediately. It is about trusting the ongoing process your brain is running on your behalf, quietly, one night after another, for as long as the work takes. Research on grief provides one of the most compelling illustrations of sleep's role in emotional recovery. Studies of bereaved individuals have found that those who maintain better sleep quality in the months following a loss show significantly faster emotional recovery compared to those with disrupted sleep, even when controlling for severity of loss and social support. Sleep does not diminish the significance of what is grieved. It supports the brain's capacity to integrate profound emotional experiences into the ongoing narrative of a life. The emotional work of sleep is not erasure. It is metabolization, the slow transformation of raw emotional material into something the mind can hold without being overwhelmed by it. Acetylcholine, a neurotransmitter released abundantly during REM sleep, appears to play a role in setting the neurochemical conditions for emotional memory reprocessing. Acetylcholine promotes a state of flexible, associative thinking within the brain, loosening rigid categorical boundaries between concepts and memories. During REM, when acetylcholine is high and norepinephrine is low, the brain becomes unusually capable of forming new associations between previously unrelated memories, including linking a stressful event with neutral or positive contextual material that softens its emotional impact. This associative loosening may be one reason dreams often contain strange combinations of recent stressful experiences and unrelated memories from the distant past. The dreaming brain is not confused. It is performing integration that waking thought rarely achieves. The process of emotional detoxification during sleep is influenced by what happens in the hours immediately before it. Rumination and passive screen consumption in the hour before bed extend the period of stress-related neural activation, potentially disrupting the transition into the deeper stages of sleep where processing begins. Conversely, activities that promote parasympathetic tone, slow breathing, gentle movement, low stimulation reading, facilitate a smoother transition into early sleep stages, giving the brain a calmer baseline from which to begin its nightly work. The brain's emotional processing does not begin at a fixed hour. It begins from wherever the nervous system is when consciousness finally releases its grip. A quieter entry leads to more effective processing throughout the night. Researchers have identified a specific phase within REM sleep, associated with a particular pattern of theta oscillations, that appears to be the primary window for fear extinction, the natural process by which fear memories lose their behavioral influence when the feared event no longer occurs. This phase is sensitive to the timing of sleep relative to the original stressful event. Sleep during the first night after a stressful experience produces the largest reduction in emotional reactivity. Sleeping 1 or 2 nights later still helps, but the effect is smaller. the brain's repair window is widest when sleep comes soonest after the stress. This is one of the strongest arguments for protecting sleep during difficult periods. Slow oscillations during deep NREM sleep do more than consolidate memories. They appear to reorganize the brain's emotional evaluation of those memories. As memories are transferred from the hippocampus to the neocortex, the neocortical representation lacks the amygdala-driven urgency tag that the hippocampal version carried. The memory is, in a sense, re-encoded without the alarm. Over many nights, the neocortical version becomes the dominant accessible version, while the raw hippocampal version fades from easy retrieval. This is why old stressful memories, ones from years or decades past, are often accessible intellectually, but no longer trigger the same physiological response they once did. The work that produces that shift was done in sleep, incrementally, night after night. The connection between sleep and emotional resilience is now considered well established enough that some clinical protocols for stress-related conditions include sleep optimization as a first-line intervention. Research has demonstrated that targeted improvements in sleep quality through cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia produce measurable reductions in anxiety and depression scores, independent of other treatment. And in some studies, prior to any direct psychological intervention, sleep is not a side effect of mental health. It is one of its primary determinants. Prioritizing sleep during periods of high stress is not passive behavior. It is active engagement with the brain's most powerful natural repair mechanism, one that runs every night, whether or not you believe in it. The orexin system, a network of neurons in the hypothalamus that regulate wakefulness, arousal, and appetite, plays a complex role in the stress-sleep relationship. Stress activates orexin neurons, promoting wakefulness as part of the fight-or-flight response. During sleep, orexin activity is suppressed, allowing the transition into the rest states where emotional processing occurs. Chronic stress can persistently elevate orexin tone, making it harder to suppress this arousal system at night and sustain the deep sleep needed for repair. Orexin receptor antagonists, a newer class of sleep medication, work by blocking this arousal signal rather than inducing sedation, producing a sleep architecture that more closely resembles natural sleep. The relationship between sleep and memory is asymmetric. Sleep deprivation impairs the formation of new memories far more severely than it impairs retrieval of old ones. A sleep-deprived person is not simply recalling yesterday's difficulties with greater frequency. They are also failing to form the new memories that would, over time, provide the brain with updated evidence that the situation has changed or resolved. Without new, competing memories being consolidated, the old stressful memory occupies disproportionate retrieval space. Restoring sleep supports recovery not only by processing existing stressful memories, but by enabling the formation of new, positive or neutral ones. The raw material the brain eventually uses to update its emotional assessment of a situation. One of the quieter effects of good sleep on stress is its influence on cognitive appraisal, the process by which the brain evaluates whether a situation constitutes a threat and how large that threat is. Sleep-deprived individuals consistently rate ambiguous situations as more threatening than well-slept individuals rating identical scenarios. Brain imaging shows this difference originates in the prefrontal cortex's ability to regulate initial amygdala responses. In well-slept individuals, the prefrontal cortex applies a dampening signal that prevents the initial threat response from fully driving the interpretation of a neutral event. Sleep does not just process past stress. It changes the likelihood that tomorrow's experiences will be appraised as stressful in the first place, preparing you to meet the day with a calmer threshold. And imagine, even when everything seems empty, space is always full of waves, vibrations, invisible energy. The space inside and around you is never truly empty. Imagine you're floating on a calm lake. But beneath the surface, there's always a gentle current. Your body is doing something extraordinary right now, and it asks nothing of you. Now we continue the journey. During REM sleep, the brain's visual processing regions, particularly the occipital cortex, are highly active, generating the rich visual content of dreams. This activity reflects the brain's attempt to construct narrative and context around emotional memories being processed. By embedding a stressful experience within a visual story, often combined with unrelated memories and images, the dreaming brain creates a form of emotional metaphor that may help diffuse the directness of the original event. You do not dream the stressor. You dream something adjacent to it, something that allows the emotional core to be examined at one remove, softened by the indirection of imagery. The dream is the mind's way of approaching what it cannot yet face directly. The body's stress response involves the entire hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, a cascade of hormonal signals beginning in the hypothalamus, passing through the pituitary gland, and ending with the adrenal glands releasing cortisol and adrenaline. During the day, chronic activation of this axis produces a sustained hormonal stress state. During sleep, the HPA axis progressively quiets. Cortisol falls. Pituitary signaling shifts toward growth hormone and prolactin, and adrenal output declines. This overnight suppression is not a passive rest. It is a scheduled biological reset that allows the system to return to its baseline sensitivity. Without adequate sleep, this reset is incomplete, leaving the axis primed at a higher baseline for the day ahead. The brain's reward circuitry, centered on dopaminergic pathways running through the nucleus accumbens and ventral tegmental area, is influenced by sleep and stress in connected ways. Chronic stress suppresses reward sensitivity, reducing the brain's capacity to experience pleasure or motivation from everyday activities, one of the neurological signatures of burnout. Adequate sleep restores dopaminergic tone. Research has shown that even a single night of recovery sleep after a period of sleep restriction produces measurable increases in dopamine receptor availability in the striatum, the brain's primary reward processing region. Sleep restores not just the capacity to manage stress, but the capacity to feel rewarded by life, a function that chronic stress quietly erodes. The relationship between REM sleep and the processing of social emotional experiences is an active area of research. Emerging studies examining how sleep modulates responses to social stressors, including shame and rejection, suggest that REM sleep, more than slow-wave sleep, is responsible for reducing physiological reactivity the following day. The research also indicates that theta oscillations during REM specifically correlate with the degree of emotional recovery, suggesting that the frequency of brain activity during REM, not just its duration, may determine the effectiveness of overnight repair for socially painful experiences. Social stress, which tends to feel most intractable, may be precisely the type that REM sleep is most specialized to process. Sleep architecture differs meaningfully between individuals in ways that partly determine baseline emotional resilience. People who naturally cycle through more REM sleep per night tend to show greater emotional flexibility, lower baseline anxiety, and faster recovery from stressful events compared to those with lower natural REM proportions. This does not mean emotional resilience is fixed by biology. Sleep quality, timing, consistency, and surrounding behaviors all influence effective REM proportion, regardless of genetics. But understanding your own sleep patterns, how much REM you tend to get, when it occurs, what disrupts it, provides genuinely useful information about your emotional processing capacity, not just your tiredness levels. Sleep architecture is, in this sense, emotional architecture. Alcohol is commonly used as a stress management tool, and its short-term sedative effects create the impression that it improves sleep. But alcohol profoundly disrupts sleep architecture, suppressing REM in the first half of the night and causing fragmented, lighter sleep in the second half. Since REM is the primary stage for emotional memory processing, alcohol-assisted sleep systematically removes the stage the brain most needs for overnight stress recovery. A person who drinks regularly before bed is consistently depriving themselves of the neural repair cycle that would reduce their baseline stress reactivity over time. The stress they hope to manage with alcohol accumulates instead, because the mechanism that would process it is being chemically blocked each night. The experience of lying awake despite exhaustion, a hallmark of stress-related insomnia, reflects a specific neurological state called hyperarousal. In hyperarousal, the default mode network, the amygdala, and the anterior cingulate cortex remain abnormally active at sleep onset, preventing the brain from making the transition to sleep. Rather than quieting, the mind reviews, plans, and replays, often circling the same stressful material repeatedly. This loop is not productive processing. It lacks the neurochemical conditions, the low norepinephrine, the high acetylcholine, the slow oscillatory framework that makes sleep-based emotional processing effective. Lying awake and ruminating is not a substitute for sleep. It is the absence of the only condition under which the brain can actually complete the work. The brain's capacity to generate slow-wave sleep declines naturally with age, beginning around the mid-30s and decreasing progressively into later decades. Older adults spend proportionally less time in slow-wave sleep, meaning reduced glymphatic clearing, less efficient cortisol suppression, and altered memory consolidation. Older adults also often experience earlier circadian timing, waking earlier in the morning and cutting into REM proportion. Understanding these age-related shifts helps explain why stress recovery often feels more effortful with age. Not because older people are less resilient, but because the biological machinery of overnight repair is operating under more constrained conditions and may benefit from more deliberate support, such as consistent sleep timing and reduced evening stimulation. In animal studies, researchers have been able to specifically suppress REM sleep in mice during and after stressful experiences and observe the behavioral consequences. Mice denied REM sleep after a fear conditioning event showed dramatically elevated and prolonged fear responses compared to mice allowed normal sleep. They also failed to extinguish the fear response over subsequent days at the normal rate. When REM sleep is selectively restored, leaving other sleep stages intact, fear extinction proceeds at normal speed. This controlled experimental work provides some of the most direct evidence available that REM sleep is causally necessary for emotional recovery. Remove REM, and the brain cannot complete the processing that reduces fear. The cerebellum, long thought to be primarily involved in motor coordination, has been found to play a role in emotional regulation and the processing of social threat. During sleep, it shows coordinated activity with limbic structures, suggesting it participates in the overnight integration of emotionally significant experiences. While the precise role of the cerebellum in sleep-based emotional processing is still being mapped, these findings contribute to a growing recognition that emotional repair during sleep involves coordinated activity across the entire brain, a distributed, whole-system process that uses the offline hours of sleep to do work that waking consciousness cannot prioritize without disrupting ongoing function. The timing of stressful experiences within the day influences how effectively they are processed during sleep. Stressors encountered late in the afternoon or evening appear to be processed somewhat differently than morning stressors, partly because of differences in cortisol levels at the time of encoding and partly because of the shorter interval before the first sleep cycle. Research suggests that evening stressors may require more subsequent nights to fully integrate. This is one reason that evening news, late-night conflict, and screen-based stress exposure close to bedtime tend to produce sleep that feels less restorative than sleep that follows a calmer pre-sleep interval. The brain cannot always immediately process what it has just received. The practice of writing about stressful experiences, expressive writing, has been shown across multiple studies to produce measurable improvements in emotional well-being and physical health markers over time. One hypothesis involves sleep. Expressive writing before bed may help the brain initiate the narrative and contextual processing that normally occurs during sleep, providing a partial off-ramp for the most active emotional material before sleep onset. Studies have found that expressive writing in the hour before bed reduces pre-sleep cognitive arousal and improves sleep quality in stressed individuals. The brain appears to benefit from any opportunity to begin organizing emotionally charged material, and sleep then continues that organization through the night. Chronic stress changes the physical structure of the brain over time in ways that sleep can only partially reverse. Prolonged cortisol exposure causes dendritic retraction in the prefrontal cortex. The regulatory region loses some of the physical branching that allows it to communicate efficiently with the amygdala and hippocampus. Hippocampal volume also decreases with chronic stress and sleep deprivation. Crucially, These structural changes are partly reversible. Animal studies and some human neuroimaging research suggest that extended periods of adequate sleep following chronic stress allow partial recovery of prefrontal dendritic complexity and hippocampal volume. Sleep does not fully undo structural consequences of prolonged stress, but it initiates the neural repair that moves the brain back toward its original architecture. The study of shift workers provides a natural experiment in the long-term consequences of disrupted sleep on stress biology. Shift workers, required to sleep at biologically misaligned times, consistently show elevated cortisol profiles, higher rates of anxiety and depression, impaired immune function, and reduced emotional regulation compared to day shift counterparts. These effects emerge even when total sleep hours are comparable, confirming that circadian timing, not just sleep duration, is essential for effective overnight stress processing. The body's repair systems operate on a clock synchronized to the day-night cycle. Sleeping at the wrong time does not fully trigger the same hormonal and neural repair cascades that biologically aligned sleep provides. Mindfulness meditation practice has been shown to increase slow-wave sleep and improve overall sleep architecture in regular practitioners. The proposed mechanism involves the reduction of pre-sleep cognitive arousal, the mental activity that delays sleep onset and fragments early sleep cycles. Mindfulness trains the ability to observe thoughts without engaging with them, which may reduce the extent to which stressful material continues to activate the default mode network during the transition towards sleep. Practitioners who meditate regularly also show reduced amygdala reactivity and stronger prefrontal regulatory control during waking hours, the same neural changes that good sleep produces. Mindfulness and sleep appear to reinforce the same neural architecture. The experience of waking and feeling that a problem seems clearer or more manageable than it did before sleep has a neurological basis. During sleep, particularly during REM integration, the brain forms new associations between recently acquired memories and older, related knowledge stored in the neocortex. This process sometimes produces novel connections that were not apparent before sleep, what researchers call insight. Sleeping on it reflects a real biological phenomenon. Sleep allows the brain to process stressful or unsolved problems in a broader associative context, occasionally surfacing connections that lead to resolution. The brain at rest is making connections that the focused, stressed, waking mind does not have the cognitive space to form. Neuroplasticity, the brain's capacity to reorganize itself by forming new neural connections, is strongly supported by sleep. During waking hours, experience drives synaptic strengthening in active circuits. During sleep, a process called synaptic homeostasis occurs. Overall synaptic strength is downscaled, preventing runaway potentiation and restoring the brain's capacity to form new connections the following day. This downscaling preferentially preserves the most important connections while weakening less used ones, a selective pruning that keeps the system efficient. For stress-related circuits, the neural pathways encoding stressful experiences are subject to the same homeostatic pruning as any other memory system. Sleep does not simply add memories, it edits them, keeping what matters, quietly releasing the rest. The concept of affective forecasting, the brain's ability to predict how future events will feel, is meaningfully improved by adequate sleep. Sleep-deprived people consistently overestimate how long negative emotional states will last, and underestimate their ability to recover from difficult experiences. This pessimistic forecasting reflects a genuine impairment in the prefrontal cortex's ability to access prior recovery experiences and apply them to predictions about future ones. Well-slept individuals draw on a richer set of memory templates when imagining future outcomes. Sleep, in this sense, allows the brain to maintain an accurate emotional history, which is what allows it to predict correctly that things will eventually feel better. The striatum, a brain region involved in habit formation, motivation, and the processing of reward and punishment, shows measurable changes following poor sleep. Sleep-deprived striatal circuits become hyper-responsive to emotional stimuli, while simultaneously less responsive to motivational cues for goal-directed behavior. This imbalance creates a state where a stressed, sleep-deprived person feels pulled towards short-term emotional relief, comfort eating, excessive screen use, social withdrawal, while lacking the motivation to engage in longer-term adaptive behaviors like exercise or connection. Good sleep gradually restores this balance, supporting the capacity to act in alignment with long-term well-being rather than immediate relief. Sleep does not just repair the past, it equips the future. Among the more intriguing findings in sleep neuroscience is the discovery that the brain performs selective emotional editing during REM sleep, using targeted memory reactivation, in which memory cues are played softly during sleep. Researchers have been able to direct the brain's overnight processing towards specific stressful memories. Emotionally arousing memories that receive targeted reactivation during REM show lower amygdala response and reduced subjective distress when recalled the following morning. This suggests the brain's overnight emotional processing is not entirely random. It can be influenced, at least partially, by what is most salient at sleep onset. The brain works on what is most present. What you hold in mind as you fall asleep matters. Research into the neurobiology of resilience has identified sleep as one of the most consistent biological predictors of how individuals recover from adversity. People who maintain regular sleep patterns, consistent timing, adequate duration, undisrupted continuity, show faster return to emotional baseline after stressful events and better long-term psychological well-being compared to those with irregular or shortened sleep. Resilience, which is often discussed as a psychological trait, has a measurable neurobiological substrate: the well-maintained overnight repair cycle. Adequate sleep is one of the most foundational biological conditions on which other contributors to resilience, social support, cognitive flexibility, self-regulation, are able to operate effectively. The gut-brain axis, the bidirectional communication network between the gastrointestinal system and the central nervous system, is also involved in the stress-sleep relationship. Gut microbiome composition influences the production of serotonin, GABA, and other neurotransmitters that regulate mood and sleep onset. Chronic stress alters gut microbiome diversity, which in turn affects sleep quality and emotional regulation. Sleep disruption reciprocally affects microbiome composition. This interconnection means the body's stress recovery system is genuinely whole system. Supporting sleep quality has downstream effects that extend well beyond the brain, and disrupting sleep has consequences that reach well beyond tiredness. Recovery, it turns out, is something the whole body participates in. Research at the University of Pennsylvania found that participants kept awake for 36 hours showed a substantial increase in amygdala reactivity compared to their baseline, an increase researchers described as comparable in magnitude to the difference seen between individuals with and without clinical anxiety. A single night of recovery sleep brought amygdala reactivity back close to the pre-deprivation baseline. The conclusion was clear. The difference between a stressed, emotionally overwhelmed person and a regulated, resilient one can often be reduced to the presence or absence of a single good night of sleep. Not a week, not a course of therapy. One night. The repair system is always ready. It only needs to be allowed the time. Large-scale research on sleep patterns and emotional recovery trajectories has found that people who maintain consistent sleep timing, going to bed and waking within the same 30-minute window each day, show significantly lower rates of stress-related mental health deterioration than those with irregular schedules, even when total sleep hours are similar. Consistency, not merely duration, emerged as the most predictive sleep variable for long-term emotional resilience. The brain's repair system appears to depend on regularity as much as volume, like a maintenance crew that works most efficiently when it can be relied upon to arrive at the same time each night, with the same uninterrupted hours to complete its work. Everything science has learned about sleep and stress points toward the same place. Sleep is not downtime. It is when you are strongest. While consciousness is suspended and the body appears to rest, the brain is performing its most complex, most necessary work. It is clearing chemical residue, restructuring neural connections, rebalancing hormonal systems, rebuilding the prefrontal regulatory architecture that stress erodes, and systematically reducing the emotional charge of experiences that would otherwise accumulate without resolution. Every hour of sleep is an hour of invisible strength building. Every morning you wake restored is proof that the repair has been running all night, exactly as it should, without any instruction from you. Almost done. Relax even deeper. Did you know? Most matter, from a grain of sand to a star, is empty space. Atoms are mostly empty space between nucleus and electrons. Even your body is more space than matter. So let go. Let all pressure, all worry dissolve. Like dust particles floating, drifting, in the immense quiet of the universe. We'll continue with the final facts. Your brain has been repairing you since the moment you closed your eyes. Every slow oscillation, every sleep spindle, every quiet cycle of REM. This is not something that requires effort. It never did. Sleep is not a choice you make while awake. It is the work the brain performs when you finally stop making choices. And it is the most reliable tool your body has for recovering from the weight of what each day carries. The night is not empty. It is full. Norepinephrine falls to its lowest point during REM. This is not a side effect of sleep. It is the entire point. The brain needs that chemical silence to look clearly at what the day left behind, and gently, carefully, begin to release its grip. You feel the difference in the morning. A slightly softer edge where something sharp had been. You rarely know what made it, but the mechanism has been running. It ran last night. It will run tonight. The hippocampus replays the day in the dark. It runs the events of your waking hours through again at night. Faster, compressed, without the urgency that came with them when they first happened. By the time they are moved to long-term storage, some of the heat has gone out of them. This is not forgetting. It is editing. The content stays. The charge softens. And it happens every night, entirely without you, in the hours when you are least aware of being helped. Cortisol declines through the night, like a tide going out. With it goes the physiological alarm state that the day's stress created. The body that wakes in the morning is chemically different from the one that fell asleep. Not because the stressor has disappeared, because the hormonal signature of that stressor has been systematically reduced. Sleep is the body's most reliable mechanism for undoing the chemistry of a difficult day. You do not have to earn that process. It runs regardless. REM sleep creates a space without norepinephrine, without the alarm signal, without the body's threat detection system running at full sensitivity. In that space, the brain can revisit what frightened it without being frightened again. It can look at the difficult thing and begin to set it down. Not all at once, a little at a time. Over nights and weeks, the weight lifts. This is the mechanism. This is what overnight therapy actually means. Not something done to you. Something done for you while you sleep. BDNF rises while you sleep. The brain's growth protein, the one that repairs neural pathways weakened by stress, does its most active work during slow-wave sleep. Each night of adequate rest is a small act of neural reconstruction. The damage that chronic stress accumulates slowly is also undone slowly, one night after another, through the same quiet chemistry. The brain is not just resting, it is rebuilding. And every morning you wake is a morning it has made a little more progress than the night before. Sleep spindles appear hundreds of times each night. Brief, invisible, silent. Each one gates out the noise, protecting the consolidating brain from disturbance. Hundreds of tiny acts of protection, performed while you are entirely unaware they are happening. Your brain is a careful custodian of what it holds. It does not leave the vulnerable work of memory consolidation unguarded. Sleep is when that custodial care is most active, most precise, and most quietly powerful. You are being looked after, even now. The prefrontal cortex, the part of you that finds perspective, that remembers how things have resolved before, that knows this too will pass, is most effectively connected to the amygdala after good sleep. Without sleep, that connection weakens. With it, that connection holds. Sleep is what allows the reasonable part of you to maintain its conversation with the fearful part. And reason, slowly, over nights, tends to win. Not by argument, by quiet, repeated presence. The glymphatic system does its deepest clearing between roughly 2 and 6 in the morning, the hours most often sacrificed to late nights and early alarms. The cortisol and inflammatory markers accumulated through the day are cleared most efficiently during these hours. What feels like the middle of the night is, biologically, the brain's most productive maintenance window. The hours you are least conscious of are the hours your brain is working hardest on your behalf. Your amygdala is quieter after sleep. Not absent, quieter. It still responds. It still notices threat. But it does not amplify every ambiguous signal into an alarm. Sleep restores its calibration. This is why the same email that felt catastrophic at 11 at night seems merely inconvenient at 8 the next morning. The situation has not changed. The amygdala has. Sleep adjusted its sensitivity while you were unaware. That adjustment is real and measurable. It happens every night. Acetylcholine moves through the REM sleeping brain and loosens the boundaries between memories, allowing new associations to form between distant experiences. The stressful meeting from Tuesday and the memory of surviving something harder years ago, connections the waking mind cannot reach, become accessible in REM. The brain finds its own context, its own evidence that things have resolved before. Sleep gives it the time and the chemistry to look for that evidence. And quietly, it always finds something. Melatonin protects the brain while it repairs. Its antioxidant properties reduce the cellular damage that stress and wakefulness accumulate in neural tissue. It is working through the night even when you are unaware of it, quietly reducing oxidative load in the very neurons that will carry tomorrow's thoughts. The night is not empty. It is full of invisible work being done on your behalf, by systems that ask nothing of you except that you allow them the time to run. The vagus nerve carries calm through the body during sleep. As parasympathetic activity rises in the night, heart rate softens, breathing deepens, inflammation declines. The body that was held tightly by the day is slowly, gently released. This release is not passive. It is an active biological process. The parasympathetic system gradually overwriting sympathetic alarm, one quiet hour at a time, through the night, until the body that wakes is measurably different from the one that lay down. Every night of consistent sleep makes the next night more effective. The circadian clock, kept regular, runs the repair cycle at its intended time, with its intended depth. The brain's overnight maintenance system is most powerful when it is most trusted, given the same hours, the same darkness, the same quiet. Consistency is not rigidity. It is the condition under which healing runs best. The body responds to being counted on. Give it the same time each night, and it will give you more in return. The brain does not need you to solve the problem before you sleep. It only needs you to stop. The solving, or the softening, which is sometimes better, happens in the hours when your thinking has stepped aside and the deeper systems have room to work. You do not need to figure it out tonight. You do not need to resolve it, understand it, or prepare for it. You only need to let the repair begin. And it will. It already has. The emotional memory that has replayed through the evening, the one that feels unfinished, will receive processing priority during tonight's REM. The brain goes to work on what is most charged. You do not need to guide it. You do not need to remind it. It already knows where to look, what to carry into the neurochemical quiet, and how to begin reducing the weight of what you brought to bed. It has been doing this work every night of your life. Slow wave sleep comes first. The body's most physically restorative stage arrives early in the night, clearing cortisol and releasing growth hormone while you are still early in your rest. By the time REM lengthens in the early morning hours, the body has already completed much of its physiological repair. Each stage arrives in sequence, doing its particular work, handing off to the next. The night has structure, and that structure has been working for you since the moment you closed your eyes. Fear extinction, the natural process by which fears lose their grip, requires sleep. The theta oscillations of REM sleep weaken the connection between a memory and the alarm it triggers. Not by erasing the memory, by reducing the reflex that fires alongside it, the memory remains available. The spike does not. Over time, over nights, the spike fades and the memory becomes something you simply know, rather than something that still holds you. That fading is not weakness. It is the system working exactly as it was designed. The brain you wake with tomorrow has already been partially freed from what burdened the brain that fell asleep tonight. Not entirely. Not always visibly. But the direction is always toward lighter. Sleep presses consistently, night after night, in the same direction, toward integration, toward softening, toward the quiet dissolution of what no longer needs to be held so tightly. This is not hope. This is neuroscience. The trajectory is already in motion. You are already on your way. You will not remember most of tonight's repair. The glymphatic flush, the slow oscillations, the REM processing, the spindle gating, the hormonal reset. None of this is available to conscious memory. But the effects are available. They appear as the slightly softer edge of a worry that felt sharp last night, as the ability to take a breath before responding, as the sense, quiet and hard to name, that something has shifted. Sleep leaves its evidence in how you meet the morning. Every night you sleep is a night your brain chooses repair over accumulation. The stress of the day is real, but it was never meant to be carried forward indefinitely. The system was designed, through millions of years of evolutionary refinement, to use the hours of darkness to dissolve what the hours of light made difficult. Sleep is not avoidance. It is the mechanism by which the body enacts the resolution that waking thought sometimes cannot reach on its own. The repair that happens tonight will not feel dramatic. There is no moment of release you will be conscious of. No sensation of healing. Only the absence, by morning, of some fraction of the weight that was present last night. That absence is real, even when it is subtle. That absence is the evidence that the brain did what it was designed to do, quietly, without asking permission, while you were somewhere else entirely. The work happened. It always does. Sleep is how the body keeps its promise to itself. The stress accumulated today was never meant to be permanent. The biological system that generates stress also contains the system that resolves it. They are two phases of the same cycle. Stress builds. Sleep restores. The cycle runs whether you trust it or not. But trusting it, releasing into it, allows it to run without resistance. And resistance, in the end, is the only thing that ever slowed it down. The morning that follows good sleep is not the same morning that would have followed a restless night. Something has been metabolized. Something that felt unresolved has been touched, if not yet finished. The brain has moved the weight even a fraction, and fractions, accumulated across nights, become the distance between who you were under a difficult season and who you are when it has finally passed. Sleep is how that distance gets covered. Quietly. Without ceremony. One night at a time. Sleep is not downtime. It is when you are strongest. This is the answer to tonight's question. How does your sleeping brain silently process the day's stress without you doing anything at all? It uses the silence. It uses the darkness and the low norepinephrine and the slow oscillations and the theta rhythms and the glymphatic clearing and the hormonal reset. It uses everything the waking hours cannot offer. And it does this for you, faithfully, every single night, asking only that you allow it to begin. And so, our quiet journey through the brain's overnight repair comes to a gentle close. We've traveled from the silence of the locus coeruleus at the moment REM begins, to the slow clearing of cortisol in the deep hours before dawn, discovering along the way that the mind you carry through each day is being rebuilt each night with a precision and care that waking consciousness never glimpses. From the first sleep spindle of the night to the last quiet wave of REM in the early morning hours, the brain has been doing its most important work in the dark, making you whole again, one night at a time. Neuro-emotional detoxification reminds us that recovery is not something we do. It is something we allow. The brain's repair systems operate in silence, in darkness, in the hours we have long called rest, but science now calls our most active period of maintenance. Without sleep, the weight of the day accumulates without resolution. By pausing to trust the night, we find that we were never as alone in our recovery as we felt. In these final minutes, take the deepest breath you can. As deep as possible. Think about consciousness itself. Yours, mine, everyone listening. All awareness everywhere. Perhaps all connected in ways we don't yet understand. You are not alone in the universe of minds. Let your entire being dissolve into the ocean of consciousness, into dreamless rest, into the space before thought. Perhaps this thoughtful exploration of the mind brought you relaxation, rest, or quiet curiosity tonight. A gentle like and subscribe helps other sleepless souls discover this peaceful space too. It only takes a moment, but it means the world to us. One quiet tap, one sleepy soul at a time. But there's no need to do anything now. Nothing at all. You've traveled far tonight, farther than most journeys take you. You can allow these thoughts of the brain's quiet repair to fade now, like the last light dissolving at the edge of evening, leaving only the softest calm behind. Let your breathing deepen. Let your body feel heavier. Let the bed hold you. If sleep comes, let it carry you. Smoothly, inevitably, into a realm where time and weight no longer matter. If your eyes are still open, the next video is waiting for you, ready to continue the journey. But if they're closed, stay there. Stay in the darkness that feels safe and warm. Tomorrow, the brain's repair work will continue. The glymphatic system will still be clearing. But tonight belongs to stillness. Rest well, quiet one. And remember, every morning you wake is evidence that the night did its work. The repair was real. The restoration happened. And it will happen again, faithfully, tonight. Fall asleep to gentle facts, where science meets sleep. Dream deeper with bedtime science. Relax, listen, and drift into sleep. Good night.